Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us today to talk about utility allowances. This is going to be a little bit different than what we've done in our previous utility allowance trainings. We do have that one posted and we will leave it up. So if you need a step-by-step walkthrough, we have that available. Today is going to be a little bit more about kind of what we see, what we've been seeing, some pitfalls. I'm going to do a HUD model as if I were a housing partner. And then we're going to walk through some other things. I have Amy Hammond here that's going to help me with the questions box. So if you have questions, please feel free to put those in the questions box. Andrea, our Shedman Sab, is going to be putting some links in the chat that you might find helpful. And then we also have Nicole Martinez here as part of our UA team in case she has anything to add or wants to jump in and help with any questions. So without further ado, my name is Kara Poli, and I'm going to be the presenter today. Just a little bit of housekeeping. We've got our mailing address and the physical address. If you need to send us something, please send it to that PO box. If you just want to come by and see where our fabulous building is, it is on 11th Street across from the Capitol, and it'll probably be a little bit underwhelming, but if you wanted to come see it, that is where you would go. The first link I want to be sure you all have is our direct website to the department. It did change back in February, so if you are not familiar with what you're seeing on your screen right in the middle right now, then it probably means you need to update your favorites and go visit our new website. It's pretty intuitive. It's got a good search engine, so if you can't find what you're looking for, it is there and available for you to search through the website, and I have tested that out on several things, and it has seemed to work really well. We also have a division phone number. If you're not sure who you need to talk to or you just can't remember one of our names, you can call and ask to speak to a monitor. You can also call that main phone number that you see there with the 1-800 number, and that will also be available as kind of a general mailbox number, and you can be forwarded to anybody within the department. The way this is going to work, this part is starting right now at 9 a.m. The entirety of office hours is going to run until noon. If you're just here for the utility allowances part, you'll probably hop off around 10:30, 10:45. If you are staying on, you can stay. If you only came for the open forum office hours and you weren't sure when that started, you're welcome to jump off and come back to us at about 10:30. However, we would love for you to stay and spend the morning with us. Going to be lots of good information, I hope, and everybody's going to be able to learn a few things. We will take a break mid-morning when we switch from utility allowances into the open forum, and I'll announce that when that's going to happen. It'll be a quick 5-minute break because we definitely want to utilize all the time we have available. We've got staff available to answer questions during the webinar, and then we've got some additional staff that's going to join us for the open forum office hours. With regards to certificates, we do not issue certificates for our office hours because there is no way for us to track who's attending the webinar, who's attending just office hours. So what you're going to get today is not going to be a certificate. You're going to get a thank you for coming to our webinar email. If you did not use the link that was sent to you from your registration, you will not receive this email. I do not have a way to resend those. I do not have a way to repopulate those. If you need to log off real quick and get on using the link that you have, or if three of you registered and you're all watching from one computer, only the person whose link you used is going to be the one that receives the thank you for attending. Everybody else is going to get a I'm sorry you couldn't join us email. I would encourage you to silence your phones, put an out of office on your email so that you can be fully present with us this morning and learn as much as you can or get all your questions answered. I understand you guys are busy. It's still relatively early in the month. You might have a lot of stuff going on, but we do appreciate your attention and your interaction during these. Like I said a moment ago, please put all your questions and comments in the questions box. You should be able to see the chat box, and Andrea is putting links in there, and she's about to put about 6 of them. No? Oh, she said she doesn't have that option. Let me fix that real quick. All right, she has access to it now. Thank you for letting me know. I'm sorry we didn't test that before. So Some department resources that you need to be aware of are the compliance forms, and that's going to be where all the forms that you use for eligibility and tenant files are. Our manuals and rules are posted online. There is a section of our website that is dedicated to utility allowance information. There are income and rent limits along with the income and rent tool listed. The training and presentations website is there, and the training website is where it would have different things listed about what we've got going on. And then the presentations website is where all of our recorded trainings like this one are going to be posted. This one will be posted by probably late next week, middle to late next week, kind of depending on the workload of the folks that post for me. And then, as always, there's a contact list in case you wanted to reach out to somebody. You can use the contact list that's on our website. If you have a different division that you need a contact list for, you can put in there, in the search box on our website, asset management contact list or something like that, and that's going to also pull that up for you. We do have some additional utility allowance resources, and this is the meat and potatoes of the webinar that we're talking about this morning. The utility allowances information from our website is a great starting point. On that website, we do have the links to the statute and to our rule, both of which are in your handout section of your GoToMeeting platform, just in case you wanted to be able to review those. The other piece that you'll need is the HUD Utility Allowances website. That top one is the link where you can get the Excel version of the HUD model, if that's the methodology that you use. The second one is going to be the document where it talks about building types and how to determine what building is what type. The next 4 links are going to be the ones that you need when you're determining taxes, and we're going to look at those when we put together a HUD model here in just a little bit. Remember, I'm going to pretend to be a housing partner building a HUD model. And then there's a PHA contact information report. That is a benefit to you because it has phone numbers and locations for PHAs. But for the purposes of this webinar, it's going to tell you, can you use that PHA for a utility allowance if you're in an area with a PHA? And it's going to give you the PHA code that you might have to use in the HUD model if that is your methodology of choice and your zip code is not available. The next website that's pretty common with regards to utility allowances is the Power to Choose website. And we are going to look at that. So if you're not familiar with that, you'll get to see that today. We also have put a link to a date calculator. Part of utility allowances is that you have to make sure the rates are not older than 60 days at the time of posting and submission. You have to make sure that the resident posting is a full 90 days and that you don't implement new rents or new utility allowances until that 91st day. This is just an example of a website that helps calculate that. This is not a required link, but it is a helpful link. You may have one that you already use, but I wanted to be sure that we shared some sort of date calculator with you guys today. The purpose of this training is to provide guidance for calculating a utility allowance under the department's multifamily programs. The department will cite non-compliance and or not approve a utility allowance request if it is not calculated in accordance with the requirement of TIN-TAX Section 10.614, Treasury Regulation 1.42-10, often called the -10 regs, and Chapter 18 of the 8823 Audit Guide. Owners are required to comply with the provisions of the above sections, as well as any existing federal or state program guidance. We do have a section of our website that's got the frequently asked questions with regards to utility allowances. And that is a helpful place to go if you're thinking, man, maybe this is a simple question. Maybe it's going to be outlined there, or familiarize yourself with it as a learning tool that's going to be super helpful to you in the future. Are there any questions before we keep going? Are we good to?
Yes, there is a question. How and where do you find information on which PHA is the voucher issuer for a specific location?
Well, that's almost a topic for another training, but the PHA report, and I've got a screenshot of that here in a little bit. It's going to tell you if you need the link to show what PHAs cover what counties or serve what counties, you can email me and I can get you that. That is not something that I have in this one because that is not as applicable to this because a PHA may serve a county with regards to vouchers, but if they don't develop a utility allowance for your specific area, and we've got an example of that here in just a little bit, then you would not be able to use them for purposes of utility allowances.
Okay. And then the next thing is a lot of people are talking about the links. So if you're pulling the link from the presentation, you'll have to copy and paste it into your web browser. Otherwise, you can look in the chat, and Andrea is working to make sure to get the links in the chat. And in the chat box, you should be able to click on the link and it should open and you can bookmark or save it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, next question, Kara. What programs fall under the multifamily programs?
Multifamily direct loan programs are going to be the home program, home ARP, home match, TCAP-RF, neighborhood stabilization or NSP, National Housing Trust Fund, and those are going to be kind of the big ones that fall under that.
Okay, next, for electricity, are we exploring sizing solar to cover? We are exploring sizing solar to cover a significant portion of our tenants' expected electric consumption. We are anticipating collecting the solar production against the same master meter and sub-metering the remaining usage. Our expectation is to submit an energy model reflecting this reduced anticipated usage, and the owner will bill the tenants for electricity actually used, solar benefit for the month. In our conversation, because this involves pricing together various requirements, utility allowance, solar sizing, and Austin Energy, COA, billing, solar requirements, we are double checking that there isn't a flaw in our logic. Thank you, and happy to discuss separately.
I think that needs to be discussed separately. With regards to renewable energy, you are going to have to show us tenant bills for 20% of your occupied tenant population so that we can see that the tenants are receiving the benefit. We do only have a couple of properties that as part of their construction, I don't think they're in place yet. I think they were still being built, did anticipate having solar panels. And what they were given was a utility allowance that took that into account and a utility allowance that did not. And that is going to be kind of how we're going to work forward with that. With regards to renewable energy, that is a relatively new thing that we're seeing. So we may ask for what you deem as more information than we need, but we want to be sure that these are truly in the tenant's benefit and that we are following all the regulations that are outlined in that. But if you have solar questions, let's take those offline because I feel like that's a rabbit hole that we might.
I gave them your email address and said you'd be happy to set up a call.
Perfect, perfect. And that's true for anybody that's on this webinar or anytime. So our website looks a little bit like this. You can go to the compliance utility allowance main link, and it's going to say request for application and then request for established developments. And there's a plus sign next to both of them. And then if you click those plus signs, it's going to give you the forms. These forms were just updated. And it looks like when I fixed the slide, I did not fix the animation. But these were updated last week. Last week. If you have a submission that's already in your CMTS account, you do not need to redo this unless you edited your resident posting to be something other than what was on our website. Then you need to get the resident posting and put that on there. That's almost like an income certification. You should not update that. That has some federally required and state required language in it. That posting should be exactly what you get off here with the form fillable information, and it should be posted to your tenants. But this is where the forms are going to be on the website. You do want to, for your future or upcoming submissions that you've not started yet, you do want to get these new forms. We did update those, and we are going to look at what those look like. The next piece is the HUD website, and you'll go to the HUD website and it's going to look a little bit like this. And then you'll scroll down and you'll see that a Microsoft Excel based version of the model is also available and can be downloaded here. That's what you want. You don't want the web-based version of the HUD model. You want the Excel version. If you choose not to submit that Excel version, we're not going to necessarily deny it. But if you disagree with our numbers, we don't have anything to compare it to. So it is a benefit to you to complete that so that we can compare it and say, oh, wait, we typed a decimal wrong here, or oh, wait, you left out a rate chunk. There's some different things that can happen. And if we're comparing apples to apples, then that's helpful. With regards to the taxes, there's 4 pieces that play into the tax calculation for your HUD models and your energy consumption models and the other ones that account for the taxes for your utilities. First off is the public utility gross receipts assessment, and this is 1/6 of 1%. And so you want to be sure that you are using that. If you're using the HUD model, it already calculates that as a percent, so you don't have to have the zeros in there. You can do 0.1667, but if you're converting that, then you would need to convert it this way. The next one is the miscellaneous gross receipts tax, and this is based on population. You can see that there are different percentages based on the population. You want to be sure that you are checking your population and not just trusting what's on the population sign or what you think you know to be true. The population of the town where I live doubled between censuses, so there is a big change that's happening in Texas right now. We're seeing some towns that drastically reduce in population, and we're seeing others that jump from that 2,500 but less than 10,000 up to that 10,000 or more range. So you want to be sure you're accounting for that correctly. City sales and use tax is listed on the 3rd link, but there's also another piece to that. Not every city is required to charge this tax. If you're in Houston, you're going to have to add that 1% tax. But if you're in San Antonio, you don't have a local sales and use tax for gas and electric. So you would not have to add that in. Just for example, if you overestimate your taxes, we will probably include the overestimation because we're going to, in our analytical brains, think, okay, well, they've had a local election or they know something we don't know, and now the website hasn't been updated, but they're required to pay taxes. But the flip side of that is if you underestimate, we're going to use what's on the website. We are not going to say, oh, well, they must know something we don't know, because we have what's on the website. And if you submit documentation that contradicts that, we're going to say, okay, now if you submit something that says, and it's very clear and concise that, hey, we had an election yesterday, residents are no longer going to be part of this, it's coming off. I've not actually seen that happen. I've only seen people get added, but I guess there is a scenario where it could come off. You would need to properly document that and submit that to us. So we're going to talk about some forms now, and I'm going to walk through these with you. We're going to talk about the utility allowance questionnaire, the resident posting, and there's 2 versions of that. They're similar but different. You also need to submit, along with those 2 things, the previous year's approved UA, the current methodology request, and all necessary backup. If you're sub-metered, we need backup of resident billing, and we need to see either a billing report or a handful of bills for each unit size so that we can make sure that the rates used for the tenants are the rates used in the calculation of the utility allowance. If it's paid to or through the owner, we need to see the backup of the rates. Those last 2 bullets kind of tie together. So the first form we're going to look at is going to be the new questionnaire. Let me move that over to the screen. Where is my mouse? I fell asleep. So I'm going to move this over. So we've got our utility allowance here, and you can see one of the things that we did with the change was we put the how to upload it in the first box or in the first paragraph because inevitably still weekly I get uploads of utility allowance submissions, and so does Andrea, and I think Nicole and Carolyn probably get them too. That's not the right way to do it. Those will not get reviewed, and then you potentially have an outdated submission that has to be redone. But if you have questions, please feel free to email me or anybody else on the UA team, but I have volunteered as tribute to be the name in the forms. So we're going to walk through this. We're going to have Pandora Springs, CMTS ID. We'll have it as 1985, development address, 221 East 11th in Austin, 78721, and that's in Travis County. We're going to pick our drop-down menu here. and we're going to pick our funding source. This is another change that we made. We added all the things. So for the person that asked, what is MFDL funding? Here is a little bit of a cheat sheet. So we're going to say that this property has housing tax credit. You would put your file number there, which I'm going to do as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then I'm going to say that this property also has home, and we're going to say that that's 789,645 or 654. We don't have any other funding sources, but if we did, we would put those there. Another change we made is I added some to this. We've now got annual review of current methodology, request to switch to a different methodology, initial review of methodology, or request to change tenant paid utilities. We're going to do this as an annual review of a current methodology. The utility is electric. Source is going to be Austin Energy. Effective date is whatever your last utility allowance was effective. And we're going to say that this is done through the energy consumption model. And now we're coming down here to new, and we're going to say electric, still going to be Austin Energy. If this changes and you're in a regulated area, we are going to question that. If I'm submitting today, it's going to be effective for rents due December 1. Well, I got to type that right, Kara. And we're still going to use the energy consumption model. The next piece is going to be if this request is for annual review of the current methodology, were the annual review requirements met last year? Yes or no? I'm going to say yes. If no, though, I would have said owner failed to submit, owners requesting to change methodologies, owner requesting to change tenant paid utilities, initial review for lease up, initial review, now buildings are 90% occupied. So there's some different things there. And they might not all fit perfectly in the no annual review of the current methodology. It's not necessarily a negative thing, but if you're changing methodologies, then you didn't meet the current methodology back last year, or you didn't meet the new one. So this was just a way that we could add in some of these other things that I get emails about as to where to document those. Beginning date of the 90-day period from today is going to be, we're going to say we're posting today. And then is it posted? Yes. And we did not edit it as of what day? Stay there. And the effective date is going to be November the 7th, 2024. Does the development have USDA rural development? I'm going to say no. If it did, you're going to stop there because the next question is, where is your RD utility allowance? We're going to say no, none of the tenants get that. The next question on number 10 is, does the development have any federally funded or HUD regulated programs like project-based Section 8 or project-based vouchers? Yes. Then we need that information, and that's going to depend on how the utility allowance works. But for this example, we're going to say no. Does the development have multifamily direct loan funds from the department or any other PA participating jurisdiction? For this one, we're going to say yes. What is the awarding PJ? And it's going to be TDHCA. And does each building have at least one MFDL unit? I'm going to say yes. What is the MFDL funding source if not through the department? So this is where if you had Houston home funds, you would put City of Houston home or something to that effect so that we could properly track, where it's coming from and who needs to review the utility allowance. We also updated the building types so that you would be able to clearly see what's counted as single family attached. This is going to be more important for folks using the HUD model because these are going to be the building types in HUD model. So we've got detached houses, apartments 5+, duplex, 4-plex, townhouse. All of those are single family attached. And then low-rise apartments 2 to 4 units. So we're going to say this is 5+. Gas is not applicable. Owner, resident pays electric. Owner pays water, sewer, and trash. Units are heated by electric. Stoves are electric, and water heaters are electric. This one's not going to matter. This one is what we're looking for. Our tenants pay the utility provider, and we don't need to answer this because it's not paid to the owner. But if it were paid to the owner, we would have to tell it through an allocation formula or individual submeters. While an allocation formula does not always go into your utility allowance, it still needs to be answered correctly on your questionnaire. One of the other things that we see people not answer is this right here. Less important when you're using something other than the HUD model, but if you don't answer this for your HUD model, we don't know how to verify what your heat type is. Most of the time, these are the two most common. Most of the time what we see is electric resistance. In this little black box, I put a note. If tenants are not responsible for water heating, so if you work off a boiler system, please do not select gas or electric on that selection item. If they are not individual hot water heaters, I would anticipate both of these would be blank. A lot of the things that we have noted in this webinar are things that you guys email us or that we have to email you guys about, and they are delaying the submission approvals. The next thing on number 14 is going to be a list of what to submit, the current UA sources, the new or updated UA source, and then it kind of lists some examples. Posted resident to notice, a posted notice to residents. And then if paid to or through the owner, a copy of the resident bill and applicable rate plan for the utility. We don't have any of those, so I'm not going to mark that one. I'm going to put my name here, and I'm going to say that it is August 9th. My title is manager. Company name is Poli Management. Phone number is 512-475-3821. Email is kara.poli@poli.com. That's not a real email. Please don't send anything to that. It will be lost in the ethers of the internet. I have then, because this is still an issue, added in the paragraph that tells you where to submit and how to submit. I understand if you're new to Texas or you're new to utility allowances, you might need all the reminders for this. I, in fact, got one this morning that was uploaded to me in CMTS, and I had to respond to let them know, hey, this is not the right way to upload that. I've also added some additional information here, and I put the link to the presentations website so that if somebody thinks, oh, I hope I did this right, they can go to that presentations website and look at that. So that's just a resource that is available to you. Are there questions about the questionnaire before we kind of take a look at posting?
There's a question.
Okay.
I don't know if it's about the questionnaire, but it said, when you say previous year approved UA, are you asking for the letter from TDHCA?
We are. And the reason that we ask for that is because it makes this review simpler and easier for us. Otherwise, we have to go back to that old file. We have to open it, take a look at it, and we run the risk of muddying up our files. So everything for your UA is, there's a CMTS folder for your property, and then it's broken down by years. And if you don't submit your 2023 submission when you submit it for 24, just the approval, not the whole submission, we are going to have to go into 23. And I know that I have, in an effort to get these processed, accidentally used the wrong information when I've merged my letters, because I've now had to go into that old folder. You're saying, Kara, pay better attention, Kara, this is, and I get it, but it's also a requirement of the rule to submit your previous year's UA. Another instance would be if you had Houston Home Funds that are now satisfied and you don't have to use their UA anymore. Now you need to submit your previous one because we don't know what you were using because you had Houston Home Funds. What else?
That is all for now.
Okay, the next things we're going to look at are the questionnaires. Or the resident postings, not questionnaires. My apologies. And I'm going to put this one up first. So the date posted, we're going to use today's date, 90 days. And you can see it kind of tells you how to do that. 90 days from today is November 7th, 2024. And this was Pandora Springs. Oh, I spelled that wrong. And we've got our unit type is going to be 0, 1, 2, 3, or 4. If you have a larger unit type, and you can let me know and I can get you an edited version for that. And we're going to say that last year it was 83 and now it's going to be 95. Change that to a 2-bedroom so it's a little more believable. And then we're going to say that you can contact the management office at Oli Management or Pandora Springs. And then it's got an information here for your tenants. And for those of you that have sent us in edited postings, this is what you're taking out, and that is a problem. I know we approved a couple of those yesterday, so if you get an email from Andrea today with that information, that is what this is referencing. You cannot take out the TDHCA part and who to contact. That is your tenant's right to reach out to somebody. So now we're going to take, if you don't know, if you're a new property, maybe you only have a handful of tenants, you don't know your CMTS ID yet, you could use one of those others. Ideally, this will be CMTS, and we're going to make that 1985, not 1895. And then we're going to say that effectively this is going to be for December 1, 2024 rent. The name of the person posting, I'm Kara Poli, I'm the manager. Company is Poli Management. Contact is going to be 512-475-3821 or kara.poli@poli.com. We added that because a lot of times we get calls from tenants who say, well, that's posted, but it has somebody's name that I don't know, and usually it's a compliance person, and they don't know how to reach you, so they don't know how to ask you guys for the calculation back up. So they come straight to me, which then kind of starts a complaint process about utility allowances. And in an effort to be more transparent, provide them that contact information for whomever is doing this so that they can reach out to people. We've also included the Help for Texans link here. This was added because a lot of the emails that we get are because people need help on their utilities, and I'm not the right person to contact for that. But this section has the right person to contact for that. The other questionnaire, move it over, or the other posting, I keep saying the wrong thing, I apologize, is going to be the same. But this is the annual review. So the one we just filled out is if you're changing methodologies or changing what's included. This is the annual review. You've kept energy consumption model. You're not changing. You put your date. You put your 90-day date, property name, unit types, current UA, proposed UA, management company contact information, then it's got the TDHCA stuff, and you put your CMTS number here, and then you enter the date that rent would be due. Then it's got the same information here, name, title, company, contact information, and then Help for Texans. Are there any questions about resident postings? Okay. So for those of, if you know you have edited this, please go back and redo that now before you have to get an email from us. If you're not sure, wait for an email from us and we will get in touch with you. So that's the forms, and these are available at the link you see there at the bottom. And then I believe Andrea has also put that in the chat several times, if not already. Again, and you're going to hear this about 5 times today. And when I stop getting them uploaded to monitors other than utility allowance, I will stop harping on this. When you upload your submission, it has to go into CMTS. You do not email that to a monitor. You need to select utility allowance documents in the type drop-down menu. In the description, please say what it is, especially if you use actual use. Actual use has a shorter review time, so that part matters. And if it's an initial request or an annual review or a change. In the TDHCA contact dropdown, please select utility allowance. We do track that. I know when you upload it, it's going to say that nobody was notified, but we have a mechanism for tracking, but that mechanism depends on you guys uploading it to utility allowance and not to a monitor. If the submission is not uploaded as outlined above, it will not be received by the UA team and it will not be reviewed, and you may have non-compliance. We had somebody last week that called Andrea and said, hey, you haven't looked at my UAs, and turns out they uploaded them to Andrea back in June, but they did not upload them to utility allowance, so they had to redo those. That is not a process that we really mess around with because it's there for a reason, so please adhere to that. There are 7 methodologies. 2 of them we don't have anything to do with except we look at them when we do a monitoring review. And that's the rural housing or rural development utility allowance. And then there's the utility allowance that are issued by HUD. And that's for your project-based Section 8, project-based vouchers, that sort of thing. The ones that we look at are going to be the Public Housing Authority, written local estimate, energy consumption model, actual use method, and HUD utility schedule model. We're going to talk a little bit about each one, and we are going to talk about some common pitfalls that we see with each of those 5 methodologies. The first one is PHA. This is the allowance established by the applicable PHA for the Housing Choice Voucher Program. If the PHA publishes different schedules based on building type, you have to use the right building type. This methodology must be used for voucher holders from the PHA unless the building has multifamily direct loan funds. Annual review by the department is not required unless there is a change to the utilities the resident is financially responsible for, or the development has home ARP, which right now is the only MFDL funded source that is allowed to use this. And I believe we only have one that has elected to use that. If the development is located in an area that does not have a municipal, county, or regional housing authority that publishes an allowance for the Housing Choice Voucher Program, owners have to select an alternative methodology unless there is a council of government, or it's in the department's Housing Choice Voucher area, or another PHA publishes a separate utility allowance for that development's location. If you're in Hutto, I'm sorry you don't have an applicable PHA. Round Rock does not do a PHA for Hutto, and there isn't a Williamson Housing Authority, so you are stuck and you've got to pick another methodology. But I've got an example here in just a minute of an area that doesn't have a housing authority, but another one prepares the schedule for it. The PHA method can be implemented immediately, but has to be implemented for rents due 90 days after the effective date. Here are some examples from the Austin Housing Authority. So for June 1, they made effective these new UAs. So that means by September 1, we would expect to see rents restricted with these amounts, not with the 2022 utility allowance. Austin may have recently published the 2024 schedules. I did not locate those. What I located were the 23 schedules. You can see they've got 5 different building types here. They've got some with an elevator, some that are duplexes, row house, townhouse, multifamily apartments, single family or detached houses. So you want to be sure that you're reviewing, and there are a lot of properties that have multiple building types. There are some that have a regular apartment building, and then they've got a whole bunch of like row houses or something, especially at senior developments. We're seeing that a lot more now. Here's an example of a PHA that produces a schedule for another area. So Denton Housing Authority develops a schedule for the city of Louisville that they make available. So if you're in Louisville and you want to use the PHA schedule, you're going to use this one from the Denton Housing Authority because it is specific to your area. But Louisville does not have a housing authority that is applicable other than for this reason right here, for this utility allowance purposes. Some things that we're seeing with the PHA method. Folks are using the wrong PHA. If you're in the city of Houston, you cannot use Harris County. If you're in the city of Dallas, you cannot use Dallas County, and so on and so forth. The other thing we're seeing is that folks are not including the fees at the bottom of the schedule. If it has other customer fees or other charges, and it has something listed there, and it goes to the utility that your tenants are responsible for, that has to be included. Even if the housing authority says they don't include it on their voucher holders, you still need to find out what it goes to, and if there's multiple amounts, which goes to which, so that you can include it correctly. You do not have to submit this annually if you do not have those multifamily direct loan funds like home ARP. We have to respond to utility allowances that are submitted. So if you do submit this in error, maybe you're from a state that has to submit it, or whatever the case may be, we are going to send you an email that says, hey, this was not required, and we're going to upload that into CMTS, and that is your response. That does create extra work for you guys and extra work for us. You do want to make sure that you are contacting the PHA regularly to make sure that you're using the most current utility allowance. One thing that has kind of seemed to be happening is those folks that are on the MFDL funded properties are not submitting annually. And we do have a couple that they did not realize they needed to submit annually. And so what we're required to do as the participating jurisdiction is calculate a utility allowance using a median rate plan. We're going to talk about that a little later. I'm going to show you how we get the median rate plan so you know kind of how to be prepared for that. Folks are using the wrong building type, and then folks are failing to check with the PHA regularly to determine if a new schedule has been released. That is the owner's responsibility. When we conduct a monitoring review, you're going to send us a UA schedule. We're going to also confirm with the PHA that that is the most current schedule if it doesn't look like it might be. I got one that was dated 2022 with an email that said it was the most current one. But when I went to the PHA's website, they had put a new one out in October of 2023. So there is a chance that something gets missed. So you want to be sure that you're staying on top of that. Are there any questions on PHA schedules? Okay. The written local estimate method, I bet we have only seen about 5 of these this year. So I know this one is kind of falling off as the more regularly used one. The estimate must come from a local provider. It has to be signed by a provider representative. It has to include all component charges and for the providing utility service item. So if the tenants are responsible for electric, it has to include anything that's under electric and any component charges that go with that. It has to include all items which contribute to the utility. If you send us a written local estimate that specifically excludes air conditioning, that is not an acceptable written local estimate. The beginning of the 90-day notification period should be the date on the letter from the provider or within a reasonable couple of days from that. I understand if you get that late on a Friday, you may not post until the following Monday and submit to us on the Monday. That's fine. But if it's 3 months later, that's not fine. The department will acknowledge the receipt of the annual submission, but we review these during the monitoring reviews and not at the time of the annual utility allowance review. Some pitfalls that we see with written local estimates. You submit a provider letter that explicitly excludes air conditioning or any other tenant paid item. Obtain the letter in April, for example, but don't submit to the department or post until October. Please submit to the department and post to the tenants on the day you receive the report or within, I use a week as a threshold. I don't know what other monitors do, but I think a week is a reasonable amount of time to get all that done. But the rule requires that it's at the same time. So if you read that literally, that means on the same day. Some folks use a provider that's not listed on the Power to Choose website. You need to be sure that if you're in a deregulated area, you go to that Power to Choose website and you use a provider that's there. Denton's zip code is on the Power to Choose website. However, the city of Denton has to use the city of Denton's utility provider. So you need to make sure if you're in Denton or another municipality, even if you're listed on Power to Choose, that you're using what your tenants have to use. And you should know that the owner gets the bill, the property gets the bill. You should be aware of who the provider is for the property. And if you're not, if your compliance and your operations are so far removed that they're not aware, you need to have that conversation, and compliance folks that are putting these together need to get that question answered. The next one we're going to talk about is the energy consumption model. The model must be calculated by a properly licensed mechanical engineer, and the license of the engineer must be submitted along with the model. There are some energy rater companies out there that are calculating these now, and if they do not have an engineer signing off on that, saying they agree with the calculations, they agree with the end results, that is not going to comply with this. The estimate must, at a minimum, take into consideration specific factors that include but are not limited to the unit size, the building type, which way it faces, design, materials, mechanical systems like what is the HVAC in the building, appliances, characteristics of the building location, and available historical data. Component charges used must be no older than those in effect 60 days prior to the beginning of the 90-day period described in the compliance rules 10.614 f3 related to effective dates. Beginning of the 90-day notification period should be 60 days after the end of the last month of the 12-month period for which data was used for the estimate. The annual review is required and will be approved by the department if compliant. Let's talk about some pitfalls that we're seeing with energy consumption models. The submission doesn't include the rate sheet. The rate sheet used and submitted is older than 60 days from the time of posting. The submission was not completed by a mechanical engineer as required, or it does not include the posting, or doesn't include the engineer's license. The posting is blank or incomplete, or the development has edited the posting. Use what the department has on the website. This should not be edited other than the form fillable items that are required. This is not a form I'm going to tell you to put your header on if you want to. The questionnaire is filled out incorrectly, which causes a delay in approval because we see one thing, the ECM shows something different. They don't match up. The posting is not submitted with the ECM review package. The ECM package is not submitted and posted when the owner receives it. The provider is not on the Power to Choose website. There, you do have the option to save a screenshot. I'm going to show you what that looks like on the next slide that shows that the provider was there the day you pulled it. But if that's not there and we go to pull it and ABC Electric or whatever provider is not there the day we review it, we're going to give you, we're going to say, hey, this provider's not there. We can't approve this. Energy consumption model and RUBS, calculated utilities, do not really talk to each other. So there's a different conversation we need to have if you're using energy consumption model, the energy consumption model, and you've got water or sewer or something like that that's calculated with an allocation method or a RUBS method. We can have that conversation separately. I do not want to derail this training because we still have a lot to go. Here is an example of the screenshot we would expect to see if you were trying to say, hey, I used Amigo Energy. If they're not there when you review it, here's the proof that they were there when we pulled it and we calculated the rates. There's an arrow that points to the Amigo. You can see the zip code matches. You can see the date is current and probably at the same time of the posting. Now, if we go to the Power to Choose website and Amigo is not listed, we might go to the Amigo website just to make sure that it is somebody that serves that zip code. And if there's a rate plan, no harm, no foul, we're good to go. But if they are no longer serving that zip code, we're probably going to reach out to you and say, hey, even though you showed us they're on Power to Choose, we have seen evidence that they're no longer going to be an available provider to your tenants. So you're going to want to be sure that you are using a reputable provider that your tenants would have reasonable access to. Are there any questions on ECM? Okay.
There is one question. Do we need to submit a utility for each size unit for our ECM method?
Your ECM method should take into account all the different unit sizes that you have at your property, and they should be approving or sending an amount so that we can approve a 1-bedroom amount, a 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom, 4-bedroom efficiency, kind of whatever your makeup is. But yes, they should be calculating, the engineers that you are using for this should be calculating an allowance based on unit size. There's different factors that go into that, square footages. Sometimes I see that the 2-bedrooms have gas water heaters and the 1-bedrooms have electric water heaters or on a boiler system or something to that effect. So sometimes there's other nuances that go into that. But yes, there should be, in the engineering report, there should be a UA amount for each sized unit. Does that get us caught up on questions?
That was all my questions.
Okay. So the next type is the actual use methodology. This is an allowance based on the average of the actual use of similarly constructed and sized units. Upon receipt of this, we will calculate the utility allowance, but first we've got to make sure that the owner sent us the required minimum information. We've got to review 20% or the total if it's 8 units and 20% is, what would that be? 2 units or, yeah, 2 units. That would not be enough. We're going to have to look at a minimum of 5 units. If you only have 5 units, we're going to look at all of them. We only have 45 days to review these, so it is important that you get them uploaded by August 1st as required, and that in the subject line you note that this is actual use. This would be an instance where if you don't have an answer within about a month of uploading, you would need to email the UA team and say, hey, I uploaded an actual use calculation. It's not been looked at. I know the 45 days are up. For those of you that submitted in June, yes, I know they're up in August, and I do have it on my calendar to look at them. Once the department issues a response, after we've calculated it, we're going to send you a letter that says, here's the amounts, and you're going to then do the resident posting on the day you receive it from the department. We do try to get these done in the morning so that you have ample time throughout your day to get a posting done, but you're going to need to have a process in place that's kind of a drop everything, look at this, yes, that you agree, get it posted so that there's not a delay in that. Like I said, what has to be provided is 20% of each unit type or 5 continuously occupied units. If you send me your spreadsheet and somebody's only lived there 6 months, that one's automatically out. It has to be households that have lived there for a full 12 months of data. Once you upload, with your upload, you're going to have to send in the Excel spreadsheet that lists out the units you want included in your sample size, the unit number, their bedroom sizes, bathrooms, square footage, households move-in date, and then the usage for each month of the 12-month period. Don't put the tenant bill amount. You need to put the gallons used if it's water or sewer. You need to put the kilowatt hours used or the CCF used if it's gas or electric. You want to be sure that you send in the component charges or the rate plan that's in effect at the time of submission. All documentation from the utility provider and copies of the actual utility bills. You have to send in a rent roll, and then you have to send in a documentation of the current utility allowance as used by the development. Here's kind of what that looks like. You've got a rent roll, you've got a questionnaire, you've got the spreadsheet you can see there, and then there's the snippet that shows the rates that are in effect. And then you can see on that last one kind of how the averaging works. There's an average, and then we take that and multiply it by the rates and the taxes to get the utility allowance, and then that's always rounded up. So this one would be issued at $73 for whatever unit size this was. I think that's 1 bedrooms. And that would be in the letter that you get from us. Some pitfalls that we see with actual use. The submission is not uploaded by August 1st. Spreadsheets list the tenant billed amounts and not the kilowatt hours or gallons or CCF used. Posting is done at the time of submission. That's incorrect. You don't post until we issue an amount. This is the only method where you don't post until you have gotten our approval. Please upload the submission with the words actual use in the upload. Because we only have 45 days to review it, if we don't know it's an actual use method and we get behind or we get closer to that 90-day review period, we are going to miss that 45 days, and then you're going to have a delay in your utility allowance information. So those are helpful hints if you are going to use actual use. If you don't use actual use now and you want to, give me a call or shoot me an email, and we can talk about some other nuances with it and kind of what's going on. It is probably the most accurate because it takes your actual tenant data and puts it into the average. Do we have questions on actual use?
We have questions. I think it's back to the ECM
Okay.
though. I think it's one question, but in 2 parts. Sorry, I was not clear on my question. Do we still need to provide a utility bill for each size unit? I have an engineer report, but need clarification if I need to also submit resident utility bills with the report, or is the report enough?
No, if you've got a sub-metered utility, we do need to see tenant bills from each unit size because we need to make sure that they kind of all align. We've had some engineering reports that have used a different rate plan than what tenants were actually billed for. And I think this was an oversight error. I don't think this was anything nefarious or anything, but we need to be sure that the rate plan used matches up. And if your tenant bills are all, 7 times what your energy consumption model comes back with, we're probably going to ask for more backup on how that energy consumption model was put together. Did they really use what's in place at the property? Did you tell them you have low flow faucets or low flow toilets and you really don't? What's the case there? We want to see that backup because your tenants are going to call us, and it's going to be easier if I have all that information ahead of time, or if Andrea has all that information ahead of time before we get the tenant complaint, because we can tell the tenant, yes, we've looked at this. Here's the engineer that calculated. Here's their contact information. Please feel free to contact them for more details. So there's some reasons that would still be required.
Some follow-up to
Okay.
How far back for the resident bills, current or the last 12 months?
Just a handful of current bills. I don't think we need an entire. A lot of folks have been uploading a billing report because that's smaller, it's more concise, it's easier, and that's ideal there.
That is all for now.
Okay. Please also remember, if you are sub-metering your water and sewer and billing that to your tenants, no matter what method you use, you cannot charge them an admin fee if you have housing tax credit funds. That is explicitly disallowed. And if you want the backup for that, I can send that to you. I've been getting that question a lot lately. The next one we're going to talk about is the HUD model method. And this is the commonly called the HUD utility schedule model, or the HUD model. You can find it on that HUD website we talked about earlier this morning. Each item has to be displayed out for 2 decimal points, and the allowance is then rounded up to the whole dollar amount. The component charges can be no older than those in effect 60 days prior to the beginning of the 90-day posting period. The 90 days should match the day you put your HUD model together. There's a date called the form date, and I'm going to look at one in just a second, and that's going to be the date that you are putting that together. The allowance must be calculated using the Microsoft Excel version. In the event the zip code or PHA code is not listed in the location, the department is going to use the PHA code for the closest one in distance. If the owner elects any green discount options for a development documentation to evidence that the units and the buildings meet the green discount standard as prescribed in the model, is required for the initial approval and every subsequent annual review. So if you're saying you're Energy Star, you've got to send us those Energy Star certificates for each unit. You will not take into consideration any costs or credits that a consumer would incur because of their actual usage. During the annual review, the department will complete a HUD model and issue an approval using the HUD model that we calculate, which we're going to look at in just a second. Some things we see that affect the HUD model. Provider not listed on the Power to Choose website. We looked at that on slide 21. Submission is not done in conjunction with completion and resident posting. Rates used are older than 60 days at the time of submission and posting. The zip code was not listed in the HUD model and the PHA code was not used. The rule does state that if there isn't a zip code, you use the PHA code and not the adjoining zip code. The posting or submission is blank or not submitted. The rates are not included in the submission. The Excel version is not submitted for review. Some folks print out their Excel version, and as long as you're sending us every single piece of it, every tab, the whole tab, that's not going to be a problem because we can still compare it. But some folks don't do that, and there is a company out there that puts these together, but they have modified the HUD model to be in their proprietary spreadsheet. Their numbers never come out the same as ours, and we are not able to tell you why, because they will not share their Excel version because they say it's proprietary. That's all good and fine, but the amounts that you get to use are what we approve, not necessarily what was submitted if there's a difference. Please don't use an average of all the rates on Power to Choose. That is not how this works. You will pick a specific rate plan and use that. You will not print all of them under a certain area and use that. That was a new one to me this last year. So when I'm talking about PHA codes, this is what I'm talking about. You can see that there's a TX number to the left of each PHA. That is what you're going to use for the HUD model to see if your zip code's not there. So if you're in Alamo and your zip code's not there, you're going to do the TX 064 as your PHA code. You can see over there at the end where it says type. Somebody asked earlier of how to know if a housing authority was applicable. If it says combined or section 8, they have a voucher program and you can use their utility allowance schedule. If it says just low rent, so you folks, if you're in Alba, you can't use this PHA schedule unless there's another authority that puts together a schedule for the Housing Choice Voucher Program in that area. This says exactly what I just said out loud. So we're going to go to the Power to Choose website. We're going to pull a rate plan as if I'm going to pretend to be a housing partner, and I'm going to use this 77027 zip code. I think that's Dallas. I'm going to go to the power to choose. I'm going to enter the zip code. I'm going to view results, and I'm going to select the plan for the HUD model, and I'm going to click on fact sheet for the desired plan. So I've got my zip code. I've viewed results. Oh, and now I'm going to click fact sheet. So let's go do that real quick. Mouse fell asleep again. So there's our zip code. I'm going to view results. And I'm going to look at this first one. It's clear, it's concise, it tells me all the pieces I need, the rate plan is current. You will look at these and some of them will say May and you'll think, well, it's August, I can't use that one. That's right, the rate plans are not dated within 60 days, so that's going to create a little bit of confusion. So now I need my HUD model. Let me move it over here. And I'm going to put them side by side. So for my zip code, I'm going to say 77027. It's going to come up as Houston. And I'm going to say Pandora Springs, Houston. We would put the property there. We see that most of you guys do that as well. Our form date, I'm doing this so I can submit it to the department today. So I'm going to say August 9th, 2024. That's all I'm going to do on this location tab. This is all the data that should stay the same and should be left alone. Tariffs are the rate plan. So I pulled these today. They were on there. So I'm going to say 8/9 is today's date. The utility is Think Energy. The rate name, let's go look, is Texas Think Basic 10. TX Think Basic 10. Effective date was 8/8/2024. We do not have a breakdown of summer versus winter, but we do have 2 monthly charges. So I'm going to let Excel do my thinking for me, and I'm going to add those together. We only have 1 rate block, so I'm just going to tell it remainder. And the energy charge is 7.06 cents. The HUD model needs it in dollars, so I'm going to convert that. And then we don't have a winter block. My extra rate plan or extra charges are going to be 3.849 cents. So I'm going to convert that, 0.03849. And my taxes, which I've gotten from those links, I'm going to let Excel do its thinking, 0.1667 for that public utility gross. Then the municipal is going to be 1.997 plus 1% for the city of Houston because Houston does have to charge. Now we're going to go over, we are done with that. We're done with the rate plan. We've saved it. I'm going to submit it with my HUD model. Now I'm going to my building characteristics. 5+, that is correct. None. Electric resistance, that is correct. And I put that on my questionnaire. So everything that it defaulted to is correct for what I need it to do. So now I'm going to go look at my actual HUD model. I'm going to clear out the data. If you don't do this, that is not a problem. We are going to clear it out when we send it to you. But because I have a utility allowance background and I'm a housing partner, I know that I want to clear this data out just so it's clean for the submission. I've cleared out data I didn't need. My 1 bedrooms have a $74 UA. My 2 bedrooms, 96. My 3 bedrooms, 118. I'm going to save this HUD model and I'm going to submit the questionnaire, my resident posting, my HUD model in Excel form, and my rate plan used and any backup I used for taxes. But for now, that is how I would put together a HUD model if I was a housing partner. Are there questions on how to do this?
There is.
I know I went through it fast, but.
There are some questions.
Okay.
The first one is, if it is deregulated and the residents don't use that provider, what are you looking for in regards to the resident bills needed to be submitted?
Okay, I'm not looking for resident bills if they set their own utility up with a provider. The resident bills need to be submitted when it is an owner-paid utility that has been sub-metered back to the tenants. If your residents have access to the Power to Choose website and you pull a provider from the Power to Choose website, they had the opportunity to evaluate that rate plan and decide whether or not they wanted to use it. That is sufficient. That is why we have that Power to Choose mechanism in the rule.
The next question is, for the HUD model, if the zip code is not listed and we use the PHA code, do we use only those with Section 8 or combined, or can we also use the low rent?
If you are using the PHA code for purposes of the HUD model, you would use the, it doesn't matter if they have vouchers or low rent. So Texas 046, I think is one. No, Texas 42. I don't remember any of them. But you can, if you click the down arrow, it's got lots of data in there. It's going to take a minute. So it's got lots of zip codes, but it also has, this has got a ton of data. So you can see it's got states. So that's Alabama, and then it would go to Alaska, or maybe that is Alaska. A coach taught me geography. I thought that Michigan touched the Canadian border for the longest time until Amy corrected me last week.
It does,
but not like Montana does. I thought Michigan was where Montana is. I was wrong.
It does.
But not up there like Montana. I'm
Yes,
thinking like Montana does.
We have an upper peninsula.
I have to look at a map. I'm gonna have to look at a map this afternoon. Are there any other questions on HUD model for this one, for deregulated?
No.
Okay. I'm not gonna say, I am gonna save it because I'm a housing partner and I'm submitting that. So the next kind of HUD model we're gonna look at is one that is for a regulated area. And for this one, we're gonna do electric and gas. So I'm gonna go to the website for this provider. And I'm gonna tell it in the search engine, we're doing San Antonio, that I want the rates. And so I see here, it's first thing that came up, fantastic. I'm gonna use resident electric rate. I'm not gonna use this residential all electric rate ever because it is only available to all electric homes with active CPS energy accounts on this rate prior to June 2006. Your tenants don't fall in that category. So you cannot use that rate plan. It is not available to all tenants. So we're gonna click this one. We're gonna scroll to right here because we know that's, well, I guess we gotta get the rate plan too. All right, so now I'm a housing partner in San Antonio. And I'm gonna bring my HUD model over here so y'all can see this side by side. I'm gonna say, oh, I made myself a little note there. 78207 is my zip code. This is gonna be Pandora Springs, San Antonio. Then I'm putting this together today because it's Friday, I need something fun to do, and I think utility allowances are wonderfully fun. And on current, for my rate sheets, I'm gonna put 8/9, that's today's date. The utility name is CPS Energy. This is residential. And the effective date up in the top left corner is gonna be 2/1/2024. So now I'm gonna go back to my rate plan and I can see here that there is a summer breakdown. So I need to tell these little drop downs that June to September are the summer amounts. Monthly charge is $950. The size of the first block is, we can see here we've got two chunks. Our first block is 600 for the summer, and then we're gonna put remainder, because it says for anything in excess of 600, you've got to add this other charge. So the peak charge, they've already converted cents into dollars. I'm gonna say 0.07503. Because I like to let Excel do the work for me, I'm gonna say equals plus that amount plus 0.02150. Now I've got my summer in there and I need to put winter. Winter looks to be all one rate block, so I'm just going to say remainder on the size, and the charge is going to be 0.07503. I'm going to come down here and do my extra charges, but it says down here that there are adjustments for the fuel cost factors. So now I've got to go back to the website, and I need to go back up here, and I'm going to go to rates. And I know because I'm in San Antonio and I've been doing utility allowances for my company in San Antonio forever, I need to go to how to read my bill. And I'm going to come down here and I want fuel adjustments and rates. And I just need the current month because I'm going to print this and save it, and I'm going to send this in with my submission. And this is the total of these other two things. So I'm going to use that. And then I'm going to put my taxes in, which are the gross and then the municipal. San Antonio does not have a city sales and use tax. So now that is it for electric, but I've got gas at my property. I have water heaters that are gas. So I've got to go back to rates. And I want to go back up here to rates. And I need to come to right here. Where did it go? Residential and base commercial gas rate. That is what I need for this next chunk. It's going to be the same here. We're going to do CPS Energy, general service. It's hard to type and look at the sideways. And it had the same effective date. So the default on the HUD model is going to be therms. You're going to change that to CCF because we can see right here that this is all based on CCF. I don't see a winter versus summer breakdown, so we're going to leave that alone. The monthly charge is $10.36. The total is going to be remainder of the size of rate block, and they've already converted that to dollars, so we're going to do 0.53500. If they had not, we would have had to do that. And then we're going to come down here and we need our extra charges. So that's going to be this amount here, because you can see resale gas cost adjustment factor. And we're going to say 0.05462. And we know our taxes already because we just did those. So now I've got my electric and my gas entered. My building characteristics, I'm going to have natural gas for heating and natural gas for water heating. So I've still got apartments 5+. I don't have any green discounts. I am done with my rates. Make this bigger so y'all can see it. Space heating is natural gas. So I'm going to clear the data I don't need because I like to have a clean UA. And then I'm going to clear out everything but electric for cooking. Other electric and air conditioning are going to stay. And then water heating, I know, is natural gas, so I'm going to put that in there. So my 1 bedrooms have a UA of 75, 96 for a 2 bedroom, and 117 for a 3 bedroom. I'm going to save this. I'm going to submit it along with all my backup and my rates and my posting and my questionnaire to the department today, because that's what day I put it all together and I posted to my tenants, and the department's going to look at it within 90 days. Are there any questions on a regulated HUD model?
No.
Okay. So then I'm going to be done with those things. Now, oh, messed up my other screen. So that covers everything. So here's what the taxes look like if I'd have pulled them up, but I didn't want to mess up the screen too terribly much. So I've looked at this, and we looked at this earlier in the day. We've got our 1/6. We've got our population base. That's where the 1.997 came from. And then we've got our sheet that has the local sales and use taxes. And then we've also gone to the website to make sure that's how we knew that San Antonio didn't have to charge that, but Houston did. Now we're going to talk about building types. There's a HUD document referenced in 614, and you can see that here. That is what we're going to default to, but HUD has also done an update in the HUD model instructions, which is much more clear. It breaks it down to just these 5, and then it tells you down here what all falls in those categories. So single family house, single family attached, low rise 2 to 4, larger apartment buildings with 5 or more units, manufactured homes. We use this HUD guidance when we are developing a HUD model, and you can use it also if you're looking at a PHA schedule and you're trying to make sure you use the right building type. If you have multiple story buildings, units on top of other units, and you have 2, 3, or 4 units, that's going to be low rise 2 to 4 units. If it is 4 units side by side, whether they're townhomes or a fourplex, that is single family attached. If it is a building that is all together and it's got multiple stories and it's got 5 or more units, that is going to be apartments 5+. This is not the same as your bin numbers. So if you've got bin numbers that are based on hallways, but it's all one building, that's apartment 5+, even if one of those bins or hallways only has 4 units. So you need to differentiate that bin numbers are no longer what they were intended to be when this program was originally set up. They were intended to be building identification numbers. Now they are not. You guys set them up as individual units and whatever the case may be, and that's fine. But utility allowances go based on the building structure. So I think that's where some of the confusion happens here. Are there any questions, or am I good to keep going? I know this one's a little bit longer. Okay. So developments with multifamily direct loan funds issued by the department may use any methodology except PHA, unless they have home ARP. That's the only one that can use PHA right now. Home match units may not use the PHA. So if you are a newer bond funded property and you have put in some utility allowance stuff, you're going to have to use one that's approved for the MFDL program if you are a bond program that now has home match units. You may not combine methodologies. You must use the department issued or approved UA for all units in the multifamily direct loan project, even voucher holders. Housing tax credit buildings in which there are units under multifamily direct loan programs are considered HUD regulated buildings, and the multifamily direct loan utility allowance will be the allowance for all units in the building, regardless of the resident being on the MFDL program or not. If you have multifamily direct loan funds that are not issued by the department, but you have City of Houston, City of San Antonio, City of Dallas, something like that, you've got to get your UA from that participating jurisdiction. We will not approve a UA for buildings in which those MFDL funds are placed. And the same rule applies with regards to housing tax credit buildings with an MFDL funded program that is now a HUD regulated building, and all units in the building will use that HUD regulated UA. The way that we're going to calculate a UA for an MFDL project that did not submit to us by October 1st, we're going to look at the annual owner's compliance report and the monitor review questionnaire. We may reach out to you if there's something unclear or we have questions on how a utility works at your property. For regulated utilities, we're going to go to the provider website, like we did for San Antonio. We're going to pull the rate plan, and we're going to build a HUD model and issue that. For deregulated areas, we're going to go to the Power to Choose website. We're going to search available providers in the area, and we're going to use the average monthly allowance for 1,000 kilowatt hours. We're going to look at that real quick on how that works. So we've got our deregulated area, but this area we're working on a HUD model for an MFDL property. So I've put my zip code in, I've got all my results here, but if I'm the monitor doing this, I'm going to click on the Excel spreadsheet. I'm going to save the Power to Choose spreadsheet. I'm going to open this. I am going to make this column bigger because that's my 1,000s. I'm going to highlight everything. Now I'm going to highlight it all again because I didn't do the right step in the right order. Now I'm going to sort this by 1,000 kilowatt hour pricing. I'm going to say okay. I'm going to come down here to the bottom of column F, and I'm going to go to formulas. I'm going to say median, and tell it yes. So then I'm going to go back to my Power to Choose website, and I'm going to say 14.5, because they don't really go into that 4.5. I'm going to say 14.5, 14.5, and I'm going to refresh results. And if I'm your compliance monitor putting this together, I'm going to use one of these rate plans that's available with that 1,000 kilowatt hour pricing. In case you wanted to know how we did that, that is how we developed those and determined that. That is only if you have multifamily direct loan funds and you do not submit for review by October 1st. That process does not start, does not happen if you submitted for annual review. We will then calculate the HUD model using that median rate plan. We will notify the owner via CMTS. The owner has 5 days to report errors related to the physical characteristics of the building or tenant paid utilities. So if we issue a HUD model and you say, wait a second, we have gas for our water heating and I calculated it as electric only, you have 5 days to tell us that. Otherwise, we're going to have to redo the whole thing if you wait past that 5-day period. The allowance must be implemented for rent due in all program units 30 days after the department notifies the owner of the allowance. So if we do these in October, you're going to get it and it's going to say for rents due after November 15th, for example, this is the rent amount, or this is the utility allowance to be used for all units. And so you're going to have to update all your rents and everything within that time frame. And you don't have to post with this one because we are the participating jurisdiction. We are issuing a utility allowance. You do still have to notify folks if their rent is going to increase or decrease. Are there any questions on how that works before we talk about, okay. So for after the federal compliance period, so when a property goes post 15, all utilities are included in the utility allowance regardless of how they're calculated. So if it's a water and sewer system that was built on RUBS, for the first 15 years, that's a mandatory fee. And for after that, it is now part of the utility allowance. This is also true for TCAP, Exchange, Bond, and Texas Housing Trust Fund developments that are layered with housing tax credits that are no longer in the federal compliance period. The utility allowance still has to be submitted by October 1st or August 1st for actual use method. And the owner is responsible for periodically checking with the applicable PHA to ensure that the most current utility allowance is in place if that's the methodology used. An owner may not change methodologies or utilities billed to the resident without prior written approval from the department. We will review these within 45 days for actual use or 90 days for all other requests. If you fail to post the notice to the residents and simultaneously submit the request to the department at the beginning of the 90-day period, you may have a delay in your 90-day implementation date. You may also have to resubmit if your rates have now gotten too old. If you are requesting to stop or start charging a utility, that cannot happen until the lease expiration or on new move-ins after approval. Annual review requirements we've kind of touched on for each one of these, but for rural housing and HUD issued utility allowances, that's up to rural housing and HUD. We don't have anything to do with that. So you need to follow their annual review requirements. For the PHA method, you have to, if you don't have multifamily direct loan funding, you've got to contact the PHA, make sure you're getting a current schedule. A lot of people do this quarterly or every 6 months. I did it quarterly when I was on site. It's up to you, but have a process in place that's more than once a year. If you have MFDL funding like Home ARP and you use a PHA method, you've been approved to use the PHA method, you have to submit that request by October 1st, or we're going to default to the HUD model, because as a participating jurisdiction, that's our requirement to uphold our end of that. Written local estimate, HUD model, and energy consumption model have to be submitted no later than October 1st of each year. That is not a moving target. It is always October 1st. Don't call me on September 30th and say, hey, I didn't get these done and I don't have time and tomorrow's my anniversary. Can I have till the 5th? No, it's been October 1st all year long. And I don't mean that to sound crass or flippant, but we have a very limited amount of time to get these done. And while we're way ahead of schedule right now, as you guys all start submitting in August and September, we will not be way ahead the end of the year, and we will have to be working on these pretty diligently. Actual use method had to have been submitted by October 1st. If you did not submit for that and you meant to, please do that today, and please let me know that's there so I can make sure. August 1st, did I say October 1st again? My brain always does that. August 1st for actual use. Thank you, Amy. That's why we keep her here, because she keeps me on my toes. So you need to make sure that those are submitted by their deadline. A utility allowance is not considered implemented until the unit status report is updated and the owner can evidence that rents are properly restricted. Our mechanism for testing is the unit status report. That has to get updated with the UA when there's a change. With the exception of multifamily direct loan developments, if an owner fails to submit for annual review during the calendar year, there is a utility allowance issue of non-compliance. And if we are monitoring the property, we will default to the applicable PHA allowance. If you're located in an area that does not have a PHA, the development will continue to fail to have a properly calculated utility allowance. For multifamily direct loan developments that fail to submit, we will calculate based on the way we've just talked about, where we get that median rate plan and we put together a utility allowance for you. That is an issue of non-compliance if the owner fails to submit, even if we default to the PHA and use that. That is not saying that you don't have to submit and we're just going to default to the PHA. That is still an issue of non-compliance, but we will use the PHA schedule to test for rent issues at the time of a monitoring review. For combining methodologies, that is allowed unless you are HUD regulated or have rural development or multifamily direct loan funds. You can combine methodologies. So if you wanted to use electricity using the PHA schedule and gas on the HUD model or vice versa, you could do that. But please remember that they have two different implementation guidelines. They have two different review requirements, and you've got to have staff and compliance folks paying attention to this so that you don't end up with unnecessary non-compliance. There is a HUD notice that tells us what to do if there are layered HUD programs. If the building is covered by multifamily, what's wrong with it? Oh, it's the actual words. It is a little bit wordy though. Oh, you're talking about the captioning.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I was like, wait, my slide doesn't say weird things.
No.
So if your building is covered by multifamily notice H 2015-4, which covers the project-based Section 8 program, or receives assistance from rural housing or rural development, then the UA is for those programs for all buildings that have those programs in them. If the building has department multifamily direct loan funds and not these other items, then the multifamily direct loan utility allowance wins, even if there's project-based vouchers or public housing. If the building has multiple HUD programs that are not covered by 2015-4, and the building does not have department multifamily direct loan funds, it is up to the owner to tell us what utility allowance they're using. Tenants with housing choice vouchers in a HUD regulated building will not use the PHA UA. They will use the UA approved for the HUD program. There are some municipalities that have some funding sources and they're telling folks that it makes it HUD regulated. That's not true based on what we know from these notices and the guidance that we have. So if you have a funding source and it's not HUD regulated, according to our information, for our program units, we're going to test using the utility allowance that you've gotten approved through us, or default to the PHA if you've not gotten one approved. And then for your other programs, you may have to use a different UA if they will not approve the same one for those funding sources. I think a lot do, but I think there's still some that don't. I told you you were going to hear this 5 more times. Please make sure that you submit your utility allowance documents to the attention of utility allowance and not to a monitor. If you are participating in the 811 program, you will have 2 submissions, one for the annual UA review and one to Bill Craner for the 811 review. He's not going to look at our stuff and I'm not going to look at his stuff. So I'm not going to use your 811 submission to approve your annual utility allowance. Neither is anybody else on the UA team. And Bill is not going to pull the one you submitted to utility allowances to say, oh, that's fine, I'm going to build them a HUD schedule for this. That's not how that works. They are 2 separate things and they have to be handled independently of each other. For application requests, I'm going to go through this part pretty quickly. The application, if it includes rural housing or HUD regulated buildings for like a project-based Section 8 program, you do not have to submit for a review to us. You can submit, you would use your rural housing or your HUD schedule in your application. If you have multifamily direct loan funds from the department, you would still have to submit to us. You can use any of the methodologies except PHA. Home ARP can use the PHA method, but they do still have to submit for approval for that. Home match funding makes a development HUD regulated. If the application includes federal funds from a unit of local government, but no MFDL from the department, we're going to issue a utility allowance that says for buildings which do not contain MFDL funds from another participating jurisdiction, you can use this. For all others, you would have to use whatever the participating jurisdiction awards. For anybody that does not have those HUD funds or multifamily direct loan funds, you can use any of the methodologies. You can submit up to 90 days before the application is due, but you must have it submitted at least 21 days from when the application is due. We will look at that within 21 days of the submission date. But we will not look at it the day you submit it. So don't get in a crunch time. Make sure you're submitting those timely. If the owner wants to change to a utility allowance other than what was used for underwriting, they must submit documentation for department approval. At a minimum, 90 days prior to the commencement of leasing activities. You guys are pretty good at that. I think we've been seeing those lease-up submissions done timely. The owner is not required to review the utility allowance or implement a new allowance until the building has achieved 90% occupancy for a period of 90 days, or the end of the first year of the credit period if that's applicable to your program. Once a request to change the utility allowance is approved or implemented, the utility allowance used at underwriting is no longer valid. So if you send us a request after you start construction because you want to put a current UA in your leasing package for your applicants, you've now initiated that annual review requirement. You can no longer say, oh, but I haven't leased up yet and I'm still using what was done at underwriting. Nope, you submitted a request, that initiates that annual review requirement. There is a questionnaire for application for funding that's available on the website, and that was updated. I do have that because I do want to show you what we changed because I think they're good changes. I think they're helpful. So you're still going to put your property name. So we'll do Pandora Springs. HTC file is going to be to be determined most of the time. We're going to put this one in Dallas, and it's going to be in Dallas County. And I don't know a zip code in Dallas, 70421. We'll just make that up. Are you applying for multifamily direct loans from TDHCA? If you're not, you'd say none. If you are, you need to select the right one. Are you applying for multifamily direct loans from another jurisdiction? No. Will there be HUD regulated buildings other than multifamily direct loan funding? If you're going to have rural housing or you're going to have project-based Section 8, your answers to these 2 questions are going to be different. You're going to say yes here if you're going to have project-based Section 8, but if you're just getting a HUD loan for your property, that doesn't necessarily make it HUD regulated. Rural housing, we're going to say no. What utility allowance are you requesting? Which one? We've talked about them. Written local estimate, HUD utility schedule model, energy consumption model, agency estimate. PHA is not there because this is a relatively new shift and I don't want people to start accidentally submitting applications with PHA. But as that MFDL stuff becomes more common with PHA requests, that would be added. But for this example, we're going to say energy consumption model. Will there be renewable energy? Yes, solar, yes, wind, none, or maybe we don't know. And then will there be a green discount? None. Energy Star, LEED, or significant green retrofit? That's going to change how we do the letter. So you want to be sure that you are giving us good information and answering correctly. You're going to do this the same way we did on the other. You're going to tell us what the owner pays, what the resident pays, what's not applicable. If it's paid directly to or through the owner or utility company. If it's through the owner and it's going to be sub-metered, you're going to need to send us some backup that says explicitly you understand that that's sub-metered, and that is going to be, you're going to have to submit residential bills on future submissions. You're going to tell us what's what down here. If it's a boiler system, you will leave this last one blank. Please make sure you select a type, especially if you are doing a HUD model. Building types, we've updated to match the other spreadsheet or the other questionnaire as well. And then you'll say your bedroom types there. You will email this to uapplication@tdhca.texas.gov. If you email it to kara.poli@tdhca.texas.gov, I'm not looking at it. It's got to go to this UA application inbox. That's our tracking mechanism there. And if Kara Poli has gone on a sabbatical for 6 months and Andrea is now the one looking at that inbox, but you emailed Kara, you're not going to get a UA and you're going to have a deficiency notice on your application. You can see here that if it's paid to or through the owner at the time of the first review, we've got to see billing evidence along with rate plans used. If renewable energy is used, the tenant benefit has got to be provided. If you have a green discount, you've got to provide that prior to the first review or prior to lease up if you're going to implement that green discount utility allowance. If you don't submit that and we come out to monitor, we are not going to use your Energy Star utility allowance. We are going to use the regular one and you may have rent issues. Additionally, if you are applying for funds on a property that has existing funds, you're going to need to submit through the CMTS account the way we talked about for existing and established developments. Here's an example of what that submission email looks like when I get one for the inbox. Tells me what they're doing, what method they're using, rates have been updated, and then it tells me who it's from. And then I review it and I send a letter back and I say, hey, I completed the review. Please let me know if you have any questions. And then I usually say I'm around until 4 or I'm happy to help anytime or something like that. Please remember, we will review the application requests within 21 days. You should receive an automated response when you submit one of these that reminds you of that. This mailbox is monitored regularly, but it's not one that we are in every single day, all day long. I do have a reminder to check it every day, and I monitor what's due and what's coming due. But due to the workload that everybody has, this is not able to be monitored all day, every day. The letters are going to look similar to what you get for an existing property. This is one that's a regular housing tax credit application. It does not have anything HUD regulated, so it's just approved. It has the whole, you don't have to review, but for 90 days or 90% occupied for 90 days thing. And then it tells you who to contact. But if you have multifamily direct loan funds, you're going to get a letter that looks like this and tells you that the annual review is going to be done in accordance with the requirements of us being a PJ. It tells you that it's not, that they are HUD regulated because that sentence is gone. And then here's the statement that if you've got existing funds on a property and you're requesting new funds, you've got to submit through CMTS. We will do a twofold. We will upload your existing developments approval or denial or response in CMTS. And then we will do the application one through the application inbox. Some keys to success: always upload utility allowance submissions to the attention of utility allowance on the TDHCA contact list for existing developments. Always email the UA application inbox for applications. Review the submission prior to upload to make sure it's complete and accurate. Make sure the postings are filled out. Make sure you're not uploading last year's an accident or you're not uploading the wrong properties. We get that regularly. The goal is to get these done without having to bug you guys for questions. And so the cleaner your submissions are or the more accurate your submissions are, the easier that's going to be for everybody. Upload all required items for the methodology chosen. Make sure you're using the most current forms available on the department website, like we went through today. Email a member of the UA team prior to submission if you have a question. Remember, utility allowance rules are building rules, not bin rules or unit rules necessarily. And multifamily direct loan funding means you have one UA for the whole property unless your units are fixed and they're only in certain buildings. Our UA team is here to help, and here are those people. We can put those emails in the chat, and you have it in your handbook as well as a reminder. And that's all I got for utility allowances. What questions or additions anybody on the UA team or Amy wants to add?
We just have one question that came in about the application update that you had. On number 3, when you said HUD, about a HUD regulated building, you said something about a HUD alone is not considered regulated. Can you expand on that?
So if you get, I think it's a HUD 202 loan, that may be the wrong number. If you get a HUD loan to help build your property, but HUD is not involved other than that loan, that does not make it HUD regulated. You don't have HUD rent limits. That you've got the rent limits that are through the programs you're applying from us, but you don't have a project-based Section 8 type HUD regulation on your development. You only have that loan, which was done through HUD to get, you know, a lower interest rate or a better whatever to get those. I know there's a method to the madness, but that does not make it HUD regulated in the same sense that a project-based funding source would make it HUD regulated.
HUD is not sending you a rent schedule.
Right. They're not reviewing your rents. They're not coming out to do an inspection on your property and that sort of a thing. So that's probably an easier way to think about that.
That was the last question.
Okay. So if you have utility allowance questions and you want to stay on, you can. We will stay on until noon today. We're going to take a quick, I just need to shift PowerPoints, so it'll be a quick shift, but we're going to shift PowerPoints real quick and then open it up to any questions until noon today. Thank you to my UA team for joining us today and Amy for running the questions, and thank you guys for being here today. As attendees, you will get a survey when you leave, whether that's now or closer to noon if you want to stay for open forum. That is all I have for utility allowances, though. No new questions popped up?
No new questions.
All right.
So when do we come back for open forum?
I think 10:45, because we probably had some folks waiting for about 15 minutes, and then we'll stay on till noon. So just a couple minutes for me to shift PowerPoints.
Okay, see you guys in about 2 minutes.
Thanks, guys. All right. I am still recording.